Hello, what we're going to be covering in this video for our 4.9 building complex input screens is how we're going to go ahead and collect our registration dates. So our check-in date and our checkout date. So what we're going to be including is there's going to be 4 separate cells. In the top cell, we're going to have a label, check-in date, and then the actual date that the customer is going to be checking in, the hotel guest, and then we're going to have a date picker, and that date picker will allow the user to select the date, and this will get saved back into this field on the right. And then we're going to be doing the exact same thing for our checkout date. So what we need to do is let's get into our actual application here. And I need to click on my second section of table cells, and what I am going to do is I'm going to increase the number of rows to 4, and then I will go into my second table view cell, and what I want to do is I want to go ahead and add a date picker to that cell, so our date picker shows up below. Then the next thing I want to do is I want to pin my date picker. So I'll go ahead and add my 4 constraints. And then finally what I need to do is I need to go into my table view cell and actually increase the size of it. So we will go ahead and increase the size to 216 and hit enter. So now my date picker will appear in that cell. So I want to do the same thing within my 4th table view cell. So I will go ahead, grab my date picker, drop it in so it appears underneath there. I'll go ahead and pin everything, add my 4 constraints, and then I will go back into my table view cell and increase the size of it. To 216. Okay, so we've gone ahead, we've increased the size for those 2 cells. So what we're going to do next is we're going to go into our 1st and 3rd cell. So I'll go into my top table view cell, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and change the style to a right detail. And then I need to enter a title. So let me click on my title, and what I want to enter in is the check-in date. So I'll hit enter, and then what I'm going to enter in the detail is just some random date. So what I am going to pick is just January 1 of 2000. And then I need to do the same thing in my 3rd table view cell. So I need to change the style to a right detail. I'll go ahead and change my label to checkout date. And I will go ahead and change my detail to January 1st to 123, January 1st, 2000 as a placeholder. So What I need to do next is I need to add some outlets. So let me just expand the size of this really quick and go into my assistant editor. And what I need to do is I need to add an outlet for my two detail labels. So my January 1st, go ahead and add that in. And what that's going to be is for my check-in date label. I will go ahead and connect it. And then I need to add one for my date picker, my check-in date picker. So I will go ahead and add that and connect it. And then I will add one from my checkout date label. And then I will add one for my date picker. And let me go ahead and see. Go ahead and connect that in. Okay, so I've added that information to my table cell view. So the next thing I need to do is in our Hotel Manza app, we need to update the detail label every time the value of a date picker changes. So before we add our IB action method, we're going to write an instance function called update date views in our add registration table view controller. So what I'm going to do next is I'm just going to go ahead and add the actual implementation of that. And I'm going to add some additional code in our viewDidLoad methods and our function. And then after that, we can talk about the code. So let me pause the video right now. Okay, so I've gone in, I've actually updated the code right now. So if we look at our update date views, basically, the pickers do have both a minimum date and a maximum date that you can go ahead and set. So what I'm doing is I'm setting my checkout date picker's minimum date to the check-in date picker, and I'm adding 86,400 seconds to it, which is 24 hours in a day. So that'll make sure that the user cannot select the same day as their checkout date. And then I'm using a date formatter to go ahead and format my date style. We're going to be using a dot medium style for it. And then after that, update my date views. What I'm doing here is, depending upon the information that is in the picker for both my check-in and my checkout, that'll go ahead and update my check-in date label text and check-out date label text fields with the date that was selected. And then in my viewDidLoad method, so what I'm doing here is I'm setting midnight today as the start of the current day, getting that from the calendar information. And then my check-in date picker minimum day is midnight today. And I will go ahead and set that date as the midnight today also. So basically they cannot scroll back in the picker and select a date that is in the past. So that will go ahead and establish that for us. So the next thing we need to do is the update date view methods need to add an action to both our date pickers so that when the value changed, that we can call that method. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and actually go into our main storyboard. Well, wait. First, I want to go back to my registration. I will do a Command S to save it. And what I'm going to do is I am going to go ahead and add that function that we need, an IB action. And it will be date picker value changed. And then go ahead and add in the sender, which is a UI date picker. And what we're going to do in this function is we're just going to call the update date views method or function that we just implemented up above. The other thing we're going to do in our view did load is I will go ahead and add in a call to update date views. So that'll go in. And since we don't rely on a data source to fill up our static field, so it won't load when it's first displayed, so we'll call that update date views, so that gets loaded in for us, so our picker and our label show the correct information. So the next thing I need to do is I need to go back into my main storyboard. So let me click on that, and I need to connect my date pickers to that IB action that I just created. So I will go ahead in my table view cell, make sure my second, oh, I'm in the wrong one right now. Let me scroll on down. Okay, so in my check-in date picker, I want to make sure that is selected. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and show the connections inspector, and I am going to drag from my value changed to my date picker value changed function. So I will just drag, and then once the entire function is highlighted, I'll go ahead and let go, and it'll go ahead and add that action for me. And I will do the same thing for my checkout date picker. I'll make sure we're in our connection inspector. I'll click on value changed, and then I will drag back in to that method. And once it's all blue, it's connected. Then the final thing we need to go ahead and do is I will go back into my add registration, and I need to add a couple of additional items to make sure. So it'll just be our check-in date equals our check-in date picker dot date. And then our checkout date will equal our checkout date picker dot date. And then down below, I will go ahead and print that information out. So there'll be our check-in and what we're going to use for that is our check-in date, and then we're going to do the same for our checkout. Okay, it looks like, let me see what I got. I got my double quote in the wrong spot there. Okay, so we're going to build and run our app and see what happens. Oh, I need to change that to a small c. Okay. We will kick it off here and see what we get. Yeah, okay, so let me add my first name in, last name, email address, and then I will go ahead and spin for check-in date, and then as you can see, my label updated and my checkout date updated. I can't spin it back, and then I'll just spin something for my checkout date. Click on done, and let me go ahead and Command Q this to get all those out of the way. And if we look down below, we have our name, first name, last name, email address, our check-in, and our checkout date. So we've covered how to actually add those, our date pickers in. So what we're going to work on next is when you actually saw the application, it was those date pickers take up just about the entire screen. So what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to adjust our cell heights, and then we're going to write some code to go ahead and show or hide our date pickers. So that's what we're going to work on next, and then we need to work on our final to the rest of our outputs, collecting our guests, collecting the Wi-Fi information, and then we can go ahead and then set up collecting our predefined options for our rooms. So that's what we're going to be covering in the next few videos.